If we could illustrate every military branch as a car, what would they be? First, we have the lovely Marines. And they're gonna be your Jeep Wranglers of the military branches. And I'm not talking about like the ones with the nice trim, the ones that you see with like a nice family riding in them. I'm talking about a Jeep Wrangler, like one without the doors, one without the top. It's all muddy, doesn't have any trim. It's the one you use when you're really trying to go off-road and you're really trying to enjoy the outdoor experience. That is gonna be your Marines. And I say this because we have to look at the Marines mission. The Marines, technically a department of the Navy, they're known as your spearhead troops. They're the first ones in and they're the last ones out. You may hear a lot of people say they join the Marines or they're joining the Marines because they want to do something tough. And they're not wrong. The Marines are known as one of the toughest branches of the United States military. Their basic training is the longest. It's a 13-week course, and it's not only the longest, it's also the most rigid and the toughest basic training to complete. The Marines are known for their infantry, and it's pretty much the bulk of the Marines. Yes, they have other jobs beyond infantry, but the infantry is the core of the Marines. They get their spearhead title because they can move into a deployed location faster than any branch. And when they get there, they're gonna tear some stuff up very rapidly, because there's no weapon as powerful as a Marine and their rifle. Now, when we talk about lifestyle, this fast-moving, rigid military isn't known for their quality of life. If you see a Marine, their uniforms always look sharp, they have a strong military culture, and they're pretty much badasses, or at least they like to think so. That being said, service members may say the Marines have the lowest quality of life compared to all other branches. They're known to sleep in barracks and non-deployed locations, and in deployed locations, they may be sleeping on tents, or even worse, they're normally the first ones into battle, so the military installations haven't been set up yet. So they may find themselves sleeping on the ground. But that's not why you would join the Marines. If you're joining the Marines, you're gonna join so you could be part of something bigger than yourself, have that honorable history, and be part of an elite fighting force, respected by all. Now, the Marines couldn't be the Marines without the United States Navy. And we're gonna say that the Navy is like a big old Astro van with guns on it. Now, the Navy handles pretty much all the major missions in the water, but they're also huge transporters. They transport everything. They transport aircraft, they transport weapons, and they transport the Marines to where they need to be. The United States Navy also has the second biggest air force out of all the military branches, and they also maintain a huge part of the United States nuclear arsenal. They have one of the shortest basic trainings, which is 8 weeks, and that's second to the Air Force. The Navy has some of the sharpest uniforms you're gonna see. The Navy is also known to have an assortment of different jobs, which also translate really well into the civilian world. But they also are known to have some pretty crappy jobs where you may be painting the ship, and I mean literally like painting the ship. And they also have jobs where you could be doing laundry for the ship. Now, as far as quality of life, it can vary depending on if you're enlisted or an officer. If you're enlisted and you find yourself at sea, you can find yourself in a small and cramped quarter. Now, the officers get the carpet rolled out for them, and they usually enjoy a better quality of life than the enlisted servicemen. Their dining facilities are known to be really good, and some may even say that they have the best dining facilities. Now, you may want to join the Navy if you want to travel, because most people travel in the Navy. You may also really like their uniforms, or you just enjoy that ship life. And then you have the Coast Guard. And I'm gonna say they're like the Alfa Romeo Giulia. This is one of those cars that you probably never really heard of, but whenever you see it, it's really nice. That's like the Coast Guard. The Coast Guard may be known as the tugboats of the Navy. So whenever the Navy needs help, they can call on the Coast Guard to help them. But for the most part, the Coast Guard is going to be handling drug interdiction, intercepting immigration vehicles, and helping people who need help who are stranded in the water. Their basic training is 8 weeks as well, but they're just not that big. They're a really small branch, so the positions are limited. But if you were to get into the Coast Guard, they have some really cool bases all near a beach. Their deployments are pretty short, and most likely you won't be deployed to a foreign war. But you also have to keep in mind that a lot of their jobs are very dangerous because of their missions, and you'll probably have to deal with saving lives. Next, we have the Army. And I like to compare the Army to the Dodge Charger. And I say they're like a Dodge Charger because the Dodge Charger can be pretty dangerous. Without that much money, you can get some pretty high-end speeds on the road. And it's the same with the Army. Their basic training is only 10 weeks, but during that 10 weeks, they're creating some pretty dangerous soldiers. So the training is not as extensive as the Marines, but you can do some damage with the Army. And plus, they have high numbers. The Marines infantry is going to be fast and light, where the Army's infantry is going to be heavy and slow. They're there for the long term. So after the Marines have already went in there and spearheaded everything, the Army's gonna come in there and set up those installations. Marines are like a katana and the Army's more like a steamroller. Their uniforms are, and their quality of life isn't known to be the best either. However, the Army has started improving the quality of life of their soldiers, and they also have a ton of jobs for you to pick from as well. As far as transferability into the civilian world, make sure you do your research. Next, you have the Space Force. And I say the Space Force is like the Rivian truck. It's a really nice truck, it's brand new, but you don't really see it that often. Just like the Coast Guard, the Space Force has limited positions available. The Space Force is not actually going out into space, at least not yet, so they do things like maintain and launch our GPS and surveillance satellites. But they're a really cool branch. All of their jobs translate really well into the civilian world. However, I would say the Space Force is probably the hardest branch to qualify for because their jobs require high ASVAB scores, and most of them, if not all, require a higher security clearance level. So you gotta be tip-top, cream of the crop to join the Space Force. Their basic training, they tag along with the Air Force at their basic training, which is 7.5 weeks. And just like the Air Force, they're known to have a really great quality of life. Their uniforms, they're gonna be wearing the OCPs just like the Army, just like the Air Force. However, I hear that they're gonna be changing their dress blues sometime soon, which is supposed to be really nice. And then you have the Air Force. And I went back and forth with this one. Is it the Cadillac? Is it the Audi? But I landed on, it's probably like a Tesla. I say that because the Tesla has a lot of technology, it's very efficient, and it's a pretty nice car. And that's your Air Force. The Air Force is gonna be one of the premier branches. Now it does have the shortest basic training along with the Space Force of 7.5 weeks. And some may even say the Air Force is more like a corporation than an actual military. But don't let that fool you. The Air Force is responsible for the most damage when it comes time for wartime because of their aircraft. They will send their aircraft out there and blow stuff up.
Yeah, direct hits right there.
Now their members may not be the most trained as far as combat goes, but they are technical experts in operating their equipment to support all the other military branches. The Air Force is one of the smallest branches, but they do a lot with the limited personnel that they have. They're the same OCPs as the Army and the Space Force, but their quality of life is second to none. The Air Force really prides itself on taking care of their people and ensuring that they have a nice, comfortable life. Even when the Air Force deploys in their deployed locations, they're known to have the better living conditions amongst the branches. Now the Air Force has gotten a bad rap that it's the hardest branch to qualify for to get in, but a lot of that came from information from a long time ago. Today, the Air Force is pretty competitive as far as being qualified to join. If you yourself are thinking about joining a military branch, I have a great channel which discusses the Air Force lifestyle and benefits. And right now on the screen, you will see a video which explains the process of joining the Air Force. Like I always say, I hope this video brought value to you. Stay beautiful, stay classy, and until next time, check me out.